Welcome to Happily Ever After is just the beginning. Keeping your relationship not just together, but happy, and we mean truly happy, is part art and part science. You've come to the right place. Here's your host, Leslie Dories.
I've long said that the biggest challenge to a successful marriage or relationship is that you are now, always have been, and always will be two different people. And navigating those differences is the key. And one of the primary ways that you and your partner differ is in how you communicate. Communication is a lot more than just opening your mouth and talking. Though, quite frankly, that's what most people do. And without effective communication, those differences between the two of you will be impossible to address in a healthy way. So to delve once again into this critical topic of communication, I am joined by writer, thinker, and interdependent searcher. I love that term, and I'm going to have to ask her what it means. Julia Winsa. So Julia, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about, I know my listeners go, communication again, but I don't think, and part of the reason why I keep having people come on and talk about it is because I keep hoping that something that one of my guests says will set off that light bulb for people. It's like, oh my gosh, we have to do this. She makes so much sense. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you wrote an article for the Good Men Project titled How to Communicate Better in a Non-Fairy Tale Sort of Relationship. So first off, I love the non-fairy tale because that's great.
Yeah.
And, in it, you mentioned 3 common ways a person communicates their needs in a relationship. So could you give a brief overview of each one of those ways?
Yes. Okay. Very briefly, one way is being calm, being caring, finding in your heart that you care about this other person, which is your partner, life partner, being vulnerable and being frank, and showing that this is about your feelings. And this is not about putting blame or guilt on the other person. It's just exposing you for who you are. That's one way. A second way, and that's usually that's received pretty well. Believe it or not, but usually yes. If you're not in a if you're not in a super toxic relationship with someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder or something like that, it's going to be received well, especially if you're calm.
Yes.
So yes, for my own part, I'm very sensitive and I easily get hyper emotional, and it doesn't work. But if you calm down and you find that, it's usually received well. Another way of communicating is being it can be that kind of desperate hysterical state, or it can be very demanding and controlling and just putting all the pressure and blame and culpability on the other person. And it creates a lot of tension. I've done it a lot of times. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm trying to learn from it all. But it kind of puts the other person on defense mode. So you kind of get this attack and defense, and you're kind of in your own ego and just thinking of your own needs. But it's demanding in just one word.
Okay.
Yes. A third way of communicating is by just not communicating. Is just omitting communication. It's just being silent. So your partner has done something big or small, just coming home late without saying or something like that. And you feel hurt, you feel maybe rejected or ignored or something like that. And you don't tell him or her. So instead, you kind of shut down, you maybe become a little bit cold, you're not showing your caring feelings. or you become passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's and this way you become resentful. So either it's clear to your partner that you're off, and that makes him kind of off and weird and cold. So you kind of create this tension. No one is really speaking up because you're afraid, or you're afraid of what it might lead to. So these are three kind of basic ways that we often communicate without knowing, really.
Well, and it's interesting because when you describe the first one, that sounds so reasonable, and but again, most of us are doing one of the other two, which is
exactly.
And and I love you talking about the demanding, and I think that this is especially when we're talking about what we want and need in the relationship. That's a scary conversation to have anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so trying to do it in a way that is productive, is challenging. And I love what you were describing yourself, but also this is for a lot of people who, when they're talking about something that's so important to them, it's tapping into that deeper emotional stuff, which means there might be tears, there might be there might be these things which makes having the conversation, both the person saying it and the person hearing it, much more difficult. And so it's like I always wonder who designed human beings and thought we should live together and get along. I call it the cosmic joke. I mean, how do we even know how to do this?
Exactly.
And then there are so many people that are so afraid of bringing up what they want that they go into that silent, the kind of what I call the mind reading school of relationships, where if my partner really loved me, he or she would just know what I need, and I don't have to explain it to them and be uncomfortable. Somehow they're just this all-knowing creature. And oh my gosh, does that create problems?
Exactly. And I just want to add one thing about that. It's also that some people, especially women usually, are more intuitive and empathetic by nature. And we kind of expect that our partner should be the same. And it's usually not true. So like, I'm very intuitive and I kind of pick up a lot of things, which my partner... he doesn't have the ability to the same extent, like to some extent, yes, but to less extent. And like, I need to adapt my communication with that understanding as well. So.
Oh, what a concept, adapting to each other. Now there's an interesting idea. Who knew, right? So you also say, and this was a really interesting point in the article about that it is easy to misunderstand and hard to understand. And I think something you were just talking about kind of taps into this.
Exactly.
But what is this? I mean, this is why I prefaced the opening with, we are two different people. We experience the world differently. That is not a bad thing. It's just an is thing. But it seems to freak everybody out.
Exactly. I mean, and this is what it is, like we are different, and we look at the world through different lenses. We are raised differently. We come from different environments. Imagine me and my partner, we come from two different countries, like from different parts of the world. We speak different, or now we speak Spanish, but different language. Spanish is my third language, and that's the language we communicate in. So we have a lot of like obstacles, and it's so easy to misunderstand because we look through our own lens and we fail to see from the other person's lens and his childhood, his trauma, what made him to be the person he is today. And what we kind of do is that we start assuming things because we are interpreting, and that's where it's also like, we think, like you said, like before, that but he's my soulmate. He should understand me. He should read my thoughts. He should know what I want. But that's never it. Like, I thought that as well. Like, you grew up in this kind of Disney fairy tale. You're fed with these stories. And when you get out there in the world and you have your own experiences and no, well, it doesn't happen.
And it's interesting because you're talking about that you guys came from different countries and actually spoke different languages. And I'm saying, I mean, even people who speak the same language, even using the same words, because the words don't necessarily mean the same thing. I mean, one of the things when I work with my clients, I'll say, well, what do you want? And they'll say, well, I want my partner to be nicer. Okay. So I actually say, so if I'm standing in your kitchen with a clipboard, what are the behaviors that I am seeing that your partner is being nice to you? Or the one I love, romantic. Oh my gosh. These words, it's like, what do they mean? And they don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Exactly. And you have to take that time and like talk. And for me, I think what helps me, like, my Spanish is not that, it's pretty good, but it's not that good. And it's like, but I'm pretty philosophical and I'm very interested about concepts and these ideas. So I use that as a way of like addressing when we're not understanding each other. And I explained to him, like, it's not, maybe I'm using this word wrong. And like, especially when we met 3.5 years ago, my Spanish was much worse. And you come back to that all the time. Like, you have to see, okay, what do you mean when you say this word, and what do you mean? And even if you're two native speakers, like my Swedish boyfriends, it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it's so often this that we misinterpret and we don't go deeper. We just stay with this interpretation, and we think that this is what they say, and without asking them, what we can do is like paraphrase their words, and we can ask them, is this what you mean, like when you say that? And we can also have our intention, I think, is super, super important. Like, so if I'm and you feel it, like, it's hard to explain, it's hard to articulate, but you kind of feel when you're resistant, when you're angry, and you're kind of in it to just like, just win. And you feel when, okay, I'm calming down, like I'm curious about your perspective. I want to know what you think about this.
Oh, I love that word. That is one of my all-time favorite words, curious.
Yes, me too. Like,
it's such a helpful word.
And I think that's so helpful. Like, in relationship, it's about being curious about, like, if I'm curious about you, it's broadening my mind. Like, I get to step into your shoes. Like, how do you look at this, and what is your experience? Why do you see it so differently? And I guess what helps me, since I've been traveling a bit, and I traveled for 2 years solo, I kind of had to tap into this curiosity, like super, super deep, because traveling is great, but it's hard. It's really hard. And you're constantly facing like cultural shocks and misunderstandings, like constantly, and you're making a fool of yourself constantly. And so you use that curiosity and just like, okay, I'm just gonna and especially in relationships, like, it's not just you're curious and you want to see new sides and blah blah blah, but if you're staying at places for a longer time and you want to understand the culture and you want to be friends with the people, you have to be very open and just like, I'm going to explore, and I'm trying to use that kind of perspective also in my relationship, which I didn't have before. This is what I've learned in the latest 5 years or something like that, to just, okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is such, because, and this is what I think is one of the biggest stumbling blocks of why I call it the biggest challenge to a healthy relationship is, if we are similar to our partners in many ways, meaning, maybe we come from the same culture, maybe we come from the same socioeconomic background or educational background or religious background or whatever the similarities might be. Then there's and I love, because you use the word assume, and in English there's a very meaningful expression about what happens when we assume. But we assume that our partner, because they're similar to us and maybe like the same things that we do and whatever, that there really are no differences. And so when those differences show up, we don't know what to do with them. It's like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you not seeing this situation the same way that I see this situation? Why are you not upset about blah, 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 right?
Exactly. And we're always different. Like, even if we're we're always different. And even just the fact of being, usually we're a man and woman in a relationship, like we have biological differences as well. And it's like, we're always going to be different. And that's interesting. Like, be curious about it, like, because it's a way of expanding your mind. Like, when you put yourself in another person's shoes and you like, okay, I'm going to have the intention to step back and try to see from this person's perspective. And okay, so here I'm just going to use the word pride, like in the sense that get away from the need to be right, and just like, oh, this is what it is for me, and this is how it is, and you should understand me, and be humble in that sense, and just like, okay, I want to understand. And a relationship, in this article I think I wrote, it's not an end, like it's not like happily after. It's also a beginning. So you begin this new journey together, and that's when all these doors opens up. Like, it depends on your perspective. Like, if you want to see it that way, you do it, and it's hard as well. It's hard. It's painful. But
what you're describing, this ability to be curious and interested, you can't do that if you're not calm and present. And so that's, and I think that is one of the challenges that we run into. But why, when you describe that first method of communication, everybody goes, oh, well, that sounds good, but how do you do that, right?
Exactly.
Because my partner's making me crazy at the moment.
Exactly. So we need to work on that ability to calm. Like, I work on that a lot. Like, it's really, really hard, and I'm failing all the time. But I'm improving. Like,
right.
It's hard. It's like you can't expect this change doesn't happen overnight. So.
It takes thinking about it and practice, and and
exactly.
Again, people just think your communication is just opening up your mouth and talking, and it's like, well, yeah, but I'm not quite sure that's going to get you where you want to go.
No, exactly. And it's also being lenient and have forbearance for your partner. Like, let them. It's a balance. It's always like the middle way. Like, you want to be kind and kind of let them improve and let them work on themselves, but you don't want to excuse them. You don't want to, this is for this or that reason, or you want to put pressure, and you want to kind of want them to improve in their communication, but you also let them fail, and you let them. Yeah, so it's this balance. But I think in modernity we're very impatient. Like,
yes, yeah. That is an understatement. Well, I need to remind the listeners that This Is Happily Ever After is just the beginning on webtalkradio.net. I'm Leslie Dories, and I'm talking communication with writer, thinker, and interdependent searcher Julia Winsa. Communication is at the heart of relationships, and it's not a panacea to every challenge, but it is an essential skill that you need to address those challenges in a productive way. Now, if you struggle with expressing your needs, understanding your partner, resolving differences, and so on, you're not alone, but you can actually do something about getting better at it. And if you're interested, I invite you to take a moment and send me an email or give me a phone call to schedule your free 5-star relationship discovery session, where we can talk about how you can be better at communication. You can reach me by phone at area code 919-924-0463. Again, that's 919-924-0463. Or you can send me an email at Leslie, Lesli, at foundationscoachingnc.com. That's FOUNDATIONS coaching, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie.com. And I want to get back to this conversation about how you can be better at communication. So, Julia, you say that effective communication takes personal vulnerability. There's that V word. Why is this necessary, and what gets in the way of it for most people?
Mm-hmm. Well, vulnerability is just crucial. Mm-hmm. It's undressing our soul, and it's opening a port to connect with the other person. It's the only way. It's a way to show who we really are. And it's hard because it's a big risk, because if we show who we are, like our imperfections, the good part and the bad, and we show who we want to be perhaps as well, we risk rejection, and it's terrible. It's really painful, and I know that pain.
I think we all do, actually.
Yeah, exactly. We all do. And we're all struggling with this. Like, we're all in this. It's not a one-time event, like, and that's what was shocking to me. Like, I thought, okay, you show who you are, and that's it. No, like, you continue to be vulnerable, you continue to expose yourself, and it doesn't get it gets better, but it doesn't get easy, and it's hard. Like, you put yourself out there, you say this is hurting me, and you might be ridiculed, you might be rejected. So, but it's also the way of showing that you really want this, and you love the other person. So.
Well, and it's, and one of the things I want to say to anybody listening is, and this may come as a shock to you, I don't know, your partner is not going to love everything about you. And I think, I think if we can accept that, of course, that's a hard thing to do, that just because my partner doesn't like this thing that I do, it doesn't mean they don't love me. It just means they would rather I would do something else instead, which of course we can talk about if that's, if it comes up, because that would be our partner expressing their need. It's like,
exactly.
Please stop leaving your shoes all over, all over the floor.
Exactly. And all these little things we can work out if we just put in the time, and like we can, but if we don't talk about it, then all these other little fuzzy things just accumulate, and we kind of start counting wrongs and so on. And it's that's very sad. But in the core, if we know, okay, like with my partner, if I know his core, I know he has a lot of imperfection. I'm very frustrated with him, like so many times. But when I look into his eyes, like, I know who he is, and that's a person I love. And I also love the person he's becoming, and that he's open to also working on himself. And I think it's also that, like, we're not this rigid, permanent thing. You have to accept me exactly for who I am. I'm not a fan of that, particularly. Like I don't have, like, I accept you for the core. Like, I've said this to my partner as well in our conversations. Like, Like, and he sometimes have used that against me, but it's like, I accept you for all you are. It's not that, but I also expect that you will work on certain things, like you're not a rigid stone, like you're always in the process of change. So
yeah, I talk about the difference between somebody's, personality characteristics, who they are at their core as the person versus their behavior.
Yes, exactly. Right. That's it.
Because, I'm somebody who has a hot, fast temper, and it means I'm passionate about things. But I need to not just let that loose on the planet, because for some reason people don't like that. I'm not quite sure why. So that's it's my husband doesn't want me to be less passionate. He wants me to be less verbally attacking. So like,
exactly.
Okay. Right. I mean, and that's perfectly legitimate. And so I do want to get to this one thing that you talked about, because this is where I think this is where fear comes in, this vulnerability, this whole
totally
rejection. Because you say one of your recommendations is to say what you need, don't demand it. So when I read that, I went, oh dear, because I think for a lot of people, just getting those words out, just asking. It's almost easier to demand it, but but that's not. I mean, but again, talk about putting your partner's hackles up. That'll do that.
Exactly.
So what do you mean by this, and why do you think that this works?
This is very interesting. Like this, of course, this come back to vulnerability again. And if you don't demand it, you're vulnerable. You just sincere. You express your feelings, and you take the risk of your partner saying no, like not, you don't want to, or whatever. So it's much harder. Like you kind of leaving it open. And this is freedom. Like this is leaving the freedom to your partner to choose. Like, and if he wants to do what you kind of express that you need, like he's not forced. He's choosing, and that makes your relationship grow, because and that makes your bond stronger.
And there's actually a secondary benefit, because if you don't get it, or don't get it right away, then guess who else has to grow? You've got to, because it's like, I'm not getting something that's important to me. What do I do now?
Exactly. Like it's not easy. Like you might not get what you want. Like I so many times don't get what I want. And like I notice, like sometimes when I'm demanding, or when it's not really possible, and I'm just stubborn and stuck and I can't let it go. And then it's up to me again, like, okay, here I am. And what can I do about it? Or what am I lacking? Like, what am I needing from him? Like, because at the end of the day, like he can't fill my empty holes. Like it's, I need to fill myself, and I need to look at my insecurity, and I need to look at like, what am I wanting? Like what is valid, and what's based on insecurity? Like how much can I demand, and like how much can I expect? And you need to communicate. You need to talk about this, and like you need to have hopefully the sense of trust to be open to say like this is like naming it for what it really is, and having the courage to say like, now you're demanding and you're making me feel pressured and forced, and then you either kind of step back, or you oblige and you do what the other person wants, but you become resentful.
Yes.
So it's if you want love, you have to take that risk.
Well, and one of the things, and this is going back to your description of it being a non-fairy tale relationship, because the fairy tale is, the soulmate, there's never going to be any disagreement. This one person is going to make me happy, which is a lie. The only person who can make you happy is you. But
exactly.
But this one singular person is going to fulfill all of your needs. It's like, oh my gosh, there's nobody can do that. And
exactly.
So sometimes, if your partner says, no, I can't meet that need, that gives you the opportunity to say, okay, if it really is a need, then how else can I get it met? And there are other ways, there are other relationships that we have that might, we might be able to get that need met in a different relationship. And I love that you talk about that when you're demanding or you're telling this person, you have to meet this need, it actually is this, it puts a lot of pressure on them. And exactly. I love that description, because I don't think, when we're the ones who are wanting something from somebody else, that we don't necessarily see it as putting them under pressure.
Exactly. And what's more is often we first of all, we are often unconscious of how we're acting, and we don't really think about it. And second of all, it's often like indirect. Like, it's one thing to be demanding and you kind of notice like you're like really demanding it like straight out, but sometimes we kind of manipulate and we kind of guilt trip, and we do it indirectly, which makes it like super hard to address for the partner, because sometimes you don't even know what it is, but you feel guilty and you feel wrong, and you just do it because you don't want more conflict or you don't want trouble. So yeah, that's another way.
Yeah, which is, as my listeners know, that's what I call making a concession, agreeing to something you don't really agree to because you've been guilted into it, or you want to end the conflict or whatever. But Julia, you have said this a couple of times, that what that leads to is resentment.
Exactly.
And that's going to be really, really dangerous.
I mean, resentment scares me so much. Like, I've seen it so many times, and it just grow and grow. And I felt it, of course, like we all have. But you see people, or people who accumulate this resentment, and then it makes you physically sick. Like, I really think it does. Like, it accumulates within your body.
Right.
And you become like, when I felt that, like in my previous relationships, and I didn't know how to communicate, or I tried to communicate, but it wasn't met. And then you become resentful because you feel like they don't care or they don't want to. Okay. And you stop communicating. You stop communicating at some point. And when you stop communicating, you become resentful, or that's my experience. Yeah. And then the love withers, like it fades away slowly. Yeah.
And that's why I keep doing shows on communication.
I love that. Yeah.
Because, and again, so Julia, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wonderful thoughts and your wonderful experience. And can you also share where people can learn, read more of your articles, learn more about your philosophy, learn more about how to communicate more effectively?
Yes. Okay. For now, I'm writing as a blogger at Medium, and that's medium.com/@julia.winsa, which is WINSA. Yes, that's where you can find my writing for now. I'm also at Twitter and LinkedIn and so on. And it's also Julia Winsa.
So I want to share that being an effective communicator is a learned skill. And if you want to get more of what you need, it is certainly one worth mastering. So my question, what would inspire you to get better at it? And hopefully you've picked up a few tips off of today's show. And hopefully you'll also keep listening to the show. So until next week, stay loving.